An unexpected bet. Billionaire laughs, but this poor boy's amazing comeback exposes hidden truths. Jake Thompson felt invisible again as he flipped burgers at the diner. The sounds of laughter and chatter filled the air, while outside, the wealthier kids from his school showcased lives filled with privilege and ease. They glided through their bright futures, while he stood there, grease-covered and dreaming. Each day at the diner felt more like a shackle, chaining him to a life he never wanted. He envisioned lectures at university, engaging discussions about scientific principles, but instead he poured coffee and absorbed the disdain hidden in their smiles. One fateful night, his life collided with fortune when he stumbled into a charity gala hosted by Richard Castle, the town's billionaire tech mogul. As Castle presented a dubious pseudoscientific claim regarding renewable energy, Jake felt a familiar heat rise in his chest. With a rush of nerves, he found himself stepping onto the stage. The laughter he first heard approached as he boldly dismantled Castle's assertion, not mocking him, but sharing in a moment of joyful disbelief. What Jake didn't realize was that behind those laughs lay a ticking clock, setting stage for unwavering consequences. Castle's gaze drilled into him, intrigue dancing in his eyes. "Let's make this interesting," he proposed, a playful smirk gracing his lips. "You deliver an innovative scientific project in 6 months, and I'll fund your education. But if you fail, you lose that little nest egg you've saved." A mix of terror and thrill washed over Jake. This was it, his chance. But what if he couldn't pull it off? The voices of doubt began to murmur again, painting late nights spent studying instead of partying, capturing how ill-equipped he felt against his affluent peers. The greasy smells of the diner lingered in his memory, claws of desperation digging deeper with every passing moment. Even with Miss Carter, his dependable science teacher, devilish insecurity whispered, "Are you worthy of this, Jake?" He plunged into research, surrounded by endless sheets of paper, a cacophony of equations, but also enveloped in a cloud of doubt. Jocks at school scoffed, their judgment crashing against his spirit. They wore their privilege like an armor he couldn't pierce. Their laughter resonated, barbed remarks striking chords of anguish within him as he questioned his worthiness for success. Days melted into weeks, determination driving him, until reality struck. Castle wasn't just a patron, he was a puppeteer, twisting Jake's opportunity to suffocate his creativity. The knowledge of this betrayal felt like a noose tightening around Jake's throat. Should he stand up and confront this injustice, exposing the underbelly of privilege, or retreat, saving what dignity he could? The gala's laughter turned haunting, echoing against his mounting frustration. Then came the fateful moment as he sifted through an old box from his attic. Within it lay his grandfather's journals, tattered pages, brimming with stories of hardship, resilience, and scientific breakthroughs that had paved new roads. With every line read, Jake felt a spark reignite within, sparking a mantra in his heart. Greatness isn't about the money, it's about fierce determination. He was ready to rise and claim his place, but a daunting question loomed heavy. Could he really overcome the formidable forces arrayed against him? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Now, standing at the precipice of the impossible, he was all but certain the next moments would forge his future. With just weeks to go, his project had to be brilliant. Failure loomed like a shadow, but Jake's resolve had never been clearer. This was about more than just a bet. This was his chance to expose the truth within a world that sought to stifle him. The clock was ticking. every second a reminder that he must fight, that he had to win, not just for himself, but for every voice that had been belittled by a system steeped in privilege. As he scribbled down his vision, he realized this could be his moment to blaze a path through the doubts, a chance to rise and redefine success on his own terms. But with each equation he penned, uncertainty whispered its siren song. Would determination be enough? Could he challenge the very foundations that sought to hold him back? The tension gripped him, fingers trembling on the keys. Everything depended on him now. The stakes had never been higher, and the world was watching. The days bled into a frenzied haze as Jake immersed himself deeper into his research. He drafted charts, wrote proposals, and absorbed scientific theories until they spun in his mind like a whirlpool. The laughter of his peers became background noise, a relentless reminder of the world he longed to escape. He often found himself awake at odd hours, fueled by coffee and the spark ignited by his grandfather's journals. Each completed page felt like a small victory, but the weight of expectation loomed over him relentlessly. The turning point came when Miss Carter noticed the transformation in him. She had been a steadfast presence, a lighthouse amidst his tumultuous sea of doubts. One afternoon, as he stayed late in her classroom to discuss his project, she leaned back in her chair, studying him with a knowing gaze. "You've come alive, Jake. This project means something to you, doesn't it?" Jake nodded, the intensity in his eyes conveying more than words ever could. He shared his vision, detailing a renewable energy model that could revolutionize how their small town accessed power. He believed in his idea, but the clause that linked his future to Castle hovered in his mind, a dark specter questioning his intentions. Would he be able to meet the challenge, or would Castle's manipulative grasp snatch this dream away? "Never underestimate your voice," she advised, her words piercing through his haze of worry. "If you believe in your idea, fight for it. You have something to say, something that could change things." With her support igniting a new fire within him, Jake wrapped himself in a renewed sense of purpose. Fueled by an insatiable desire to push boundaries, he devised a plan. Networking with like-minded students became vital to his progress. He reached out to classmates interested in science, engineering, and environmental issues, bringing them together, pooling insights, sharing knowledge. The more he shared, the more ideas blossomed. Teaming up meant collaboration, a refreshing contrast to the solitude he often felt while working alone. But with newfound camaraderie came equally potent challenges. A few affluent classmates dismissed his project as juvenile. Their superiority grated against the insecurities he fought so hard to silence. "You think you're going to change the world? Good luck," one of them sneered during lunch. That taunt hung in the air between them, thick with condescension. In that moment, Jake's instincts urged him to retreat into defensive silence, but he caught himself. No, this was precisely what he was contending against, the cynical attitudes that fueled a cycle of privilege and complacency. "You don't know what I'm capable of," he shot back, his voice steady. It was a small triumph, but it cemented his commitment to harnessing this challenge instead of being conquered by it. Determined to refine his project further, he dove back into research, seeking inspiration from old scientific studies and drawing connections to modern applications. Every night ended with exhausted satisfaction. The culmination of thoughts refined into a coherent proposal lit up his nights with possibilities. Weeks passed with relentless focus, yet doubts continued to creep in. On sleepless nights, he wrestled with the implications of failure. Could he face his peers after pouring everything into this endeavor, only to return to the diner empty-handed? The stakes felt untamed, yet he grasped onto the belief that persistence paired with innovation could disrupt the casual mockery surrounding his ambitions. As the deadline loomed ever closer, Jake stood at a crossroads. His project not merely a way to secure funding, but a breaking point for his own identity. Could he prove, not just to Castle, but to everyone who doubted him, that success is molded from grit, not privilege? The reality of his next presentation placed him on the edge of a knife. The moment had come. He could no longer enter the battle as a boy paralyzed by fear. Now he was a rebel, prepared to confront the stronghold of expectations. Would his raw determination be enough to overcome the biases that threatened to drown him once more? With every heartbeat echoing in his chest, Jake knew he had only one choice: to face the challenge head-on, unveiling his project to Castle and his peers, revealing the depths of his potential, or watching it slip through his fingers. He stepped forward, ready to present. The crowd awaited, and the air crackled with an electric mix of anticipation and scrutiny. Jake took a deep breath, his heart pounding as the weight of his dreams pressed down on him. This was it, the moment to manifest all he had fought for. Yet, as he prepared to speak, one nagging thought punctured the atmosphere. Did he truly hold the power to redefine himself? The moment loomed just outside his grasp, and he steadied himself for what was about to unfold. As Jake stood before his classmates, seconds stretched into an eternity. The expectant silence was deafening, a heavy blanket smothering any doubts he might have harbored. Suddenly, the faces around him blurred, becoming a collage of skepticism, curiosity, and indifference. He could see Castle in the rear, a looming figure whose judgment felt like a razor's edge poised to slice through his resolve. He clenched his fists, grounding himself. This was his moment to step out of the shadows, to pull the fragmented pieces of his identity together and redefine what success meant for him. Today, I'm presenting a vision for a sustainable energy model that not only rethinks our power sources, but challenges the very foundations of how we perceive energy accessibility in our community. The words came out steadier than he felt. A murmur rippled through the room. He caught snippets of disbelief and intrigue. With each passing second, energy flowed through his veins, replacing the previous apprehension. As he glanced at Miss Carter, he found her encouraging nod. It wasn't just her support that fueled him anymore. It was the knowledge he had built through trials and connections, the teamwork, the late nights, and the relentless pursuit of innovation. He moved toward the projector, heart racing as his presentation illuminated the screen. Graphs and models transformed his conceptual framework into tangible ideas. Imagine renewable energy solutions that can be integrated into our everyday lives, reducing our reach for non-renewable sources. In that moment, he was no longer just a boy from a diner. He was an architect of possibilities. Jake grew bolder, weaving in the elements of collective energy contributions. This can be a project driven by our own community, ensuring power is accessible to everyone, no exclusions. He noticed a subtle shift. Dismissive smiles faded. Curiosity took their place. Adrenaline surged as he challenged them. What if we all had a hand in creating our future instead of waiting for someone else to decide it for us? When he finished, the room was a mix of stunned silence and tentative applause. Jake's heart soared, but he couldn't ignore the flash of condescension still evident on Castle's face. "Interesting proposal, Jake," he drawled, sarcasm dripping from each word. "But can you really expect this town to change everything? Just because a few high school students had an idea?" In that instance, anger surged within Jake, a reaction tinged with dread because it struck at the core of his motivation. Instead of retreating beneath Castle's cutting remarks, he felt renewed strength. With respect, Castle, change starts small. Every major breakthrough began as a mere idea. If we're ever going to disrupt the cycle of complacency, we have to start somewhere. The room held its breath. Jake realized this was another pivotal moment. Could he remain committed to his values in the face of patronizing dismissal? He took a breath, channeling his frustration into passion and momentum. I'm not here to overhaul the state of energy in a day, but I am willing to fight for a spark of initiative to ignite real change. The room held its breath. Jake realized this was another pivotal moment. Could he remain committed to his values in the face of patronizing dismissal? He took a breath, channeling his frustration into passion and momentum. I'm not here to overhaul the state of energy in a day, but I am willing to fight for a spark of initiative to ignite real change. This assertion wasn't just about his project. It was about reclaiming his narrative. It was the intensity of purpose that had bubbled beneath his surface for years, boiling over in a rush of self-discovery and courage. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, Jake finished with conviction, feeling like a new person, as if those chains that once bound him now lay shattered on the floor. The discussion afterward was lively, questions poured in, and a surprising number of students chimed in with their perspectives. Engaged and animated, Jake felt the shift in energy. He was no longer the boy standing on shaky ground. He was someone whose voice had been heard. Yet, amidst the excitement, he couldn't shake the feeling that ideologies would continue to clash. He had thrust himself into the spotlight, but the fight to be acknowledged was only beginning. As the bell rang, clattering the atmosphere back to reality, Jake pushed through the crowd, nerves simmering beneath his excitement. People were talking about the presentation, but lingering doubts nipped at him like shadows. Had he truly done enough? Would Castle strike back with even sharper words? Or worse, undermine the legitimacy he'd fought so hard to earn? He rushed home, the complexity of his emotions swirling. One thought remained persistent. He had unveiled a piece of himself, but how much more was left to discover? And at what cost? Jake found himself on the brink of an internal battleground, wondering if he had the resilience to endure the next confrontation that loomed just over the horizon. Jake barely slept that night, restless thoughts tumbling through his mind like a deck of cards scattered on a table. The echoes of the applause faded, replaced by anxiety that twisted his stomach into knots. He replayed Castle's insidious grin at the back of the classroom, each replay sharpening the sting of doubt. Was he really ready to challenge the status quo, or had he merely ignited a fire in the belly of a giant? The next day, the tension hung thick as he sat at the lunch table with his friends. Their chatter buzzed around him, but he felt detached, like an outsider peering in. They spoke excitedly about upcoming events, but Jake's thoughts drifted toward the future of his energy model. Would anyone be willing to rally behind it, or would it fizzle out like so many ideas before it? "Earth to Jake!" shouted Ryan, snapping him back. "You in there, buddy?" Jake forced a smile, but the weight of hesitation clung to him. "Yeah, just thinking." "About the presentation?" Sarah, his closest ally, leaned in with genuine concern. "You did great, really. Everyone's buzzing about it." "Except for Castle," Jake said, bitterness lacing his tone. "He'll be waiting for the perfect moment to throw it back at me, waiting for me to slip." "Forget him," Ryan said, draping a hand around Jake's shoulders. "You know you have what it takes. Just stick to your plan." Jake took a deep breath, seeking stability in their encouragement, aware of the fragility of his newfound conviction. But the truth was, he had no solid plan. The project had emerged from inspiration, not strategy, and without a clear path forward, he felt vulnerable and exposed like a raw nerve. As classes wound down, he wandered the school's corridors, realizing he was plagued by something darker, fear of failure. The idea of returning to the shadows was suffocating, and he resolved that he would not let that happen. There had to be a way to solidify his project, to find allies who shared his vision. He could start small, he thought, reaching out to fellow students who might be intrigued by the energy model. Maybe a handful of them would be willing to invest their time and effort alongside him. Fueled by this glimmer of determination, Jake sent a message to the group chat, inviting anyone interested in a brainstorming session. As he hovered over the send button, doubt twinkled in the corners of his mind. What if no one responded? Would he be left alone again, grappling with an idea that felt far too big for just one person? He hit send and felt a rush of vulnerability rattling his insides. Almost immediately, a flurry of responses pinged back. "I'm in. Count me in, Jake. I've been thinking about alternative energy too. Let's do it." Jake's heart raced as adrenaline mingled with excitement. Their willingness to engage felt like a lifebuoy tossed his way. Yet as he read the replies, a shadow flickered in his thoughts. What if this transformed into something beyond a mere project? What if success meant opening himself up to criticism, to deeper scrutiny? The line between strength and recklessness felt dangerously thin. Determined to embrace the challenge, he texted back with suggested times for the meeting. Something inside him snapped into focus. The idea of gathering a group, of sharing resources and knowledge, ignited a spark within him. But not long after he settled into this new mindset, Castle appeared again, a specter of doubt. Jake found himself halted in the hallway, faced with the taunting smirk that could turn camaraderie to war. "You think a few high school students can make a difference?" That moment solidified within Jake a singular realization. He had to confront Castle, not just for himself, but for the validation of his vision. More than a project, this was about stepping into a new identity and forging alliances in the fire of criticism. As he looked Castle in the eye, fear gave way to resolve. It was now or never. "Yes," Jake replied, his voice steady. "Because every change starts somewhere, even if it's just a group of high school students who refuse to stay silent." With that, he turned back toward the bustling crowd in the hallway, the echoes of self-doubt fading. The path was set, but he felt the sharpening edge of Castle's animosity looming still. Could he navigate this treacherous territory without losing himself? As he moved forward, Jake knew an impending decision loomed larger than ever, and the fight for his project and his place in this chaos was just beginning. Jake spent the afternoon shifting between classes, his mind barely able to focus on the lessons unfolding around him. A relentless buzz coursed through him, sparked by the enthusiastic responses he had received. Ideas for their upcoming meeting morphed in his thoughts, relentless energy rippling through, fueling any flicker of doubt into a blaze of determination. When the final bell rang, he felt uncharacteristically anxious, stepping up to meet the group assembled in the long-abandoned science lab. What did he have to show for it? A vision, a spark. But could it be enough to light a fire beneath their ambitions? The lab was cloaked in layers of dust and shadows, but he sensed the potential. It mirrored where he stood, on the precipice of something obscured, yet promising. The door creaked open slowly, and faces of various expressions greeted him. Sarah, with her encouraging nod, was already in conversation with a few others. Each voice layered their curiosity with accepting enthusiasm. Yet there was also a palpable undercurrent of skepticism weaving through the air, the unspoken question hanging like a suspended droplet. Why should they believe in an uncertain idea put forth by a high school student? "Thanks for coming, everyone," Jake said, forcing a calmness into his voice that he didn't quite feel. "I know we're all busy, but I believe we can make a real impact with this energy model." The murmurs that followed were mixed, some eager, others uncertain. He empathized with their doubts. Even he struggled with the authenticity of his ambition. "I mean, we've all heard the talk about renewable energy," Carla, a skeptical member of the group, interjected. "But can a bunch of kids really do anything meaningful here? We don't have any experience." Jake clenched his fists beneath the table, but instead showed a smile. "That's exactly why we're here," he said, leaning forward. "Together, we can create something innovative. We can tackle the research, build a prototype. Each of you brings a unique skill, and I know we can learn from one another." As he spoke, something inside him shifted. The fragile confidence blossomed as he shared snippets of his knowledge, infusing the group with passion. He detailed how their model could study the local energy use, advocating for sustainability in a way the school hadn't considered. With each shared thought, he saw flickers of interest, eager eyes brightening as he painted an image of potential. Imagine presenting something tangible, something that convinces the administration to invest in us, he continued, imagining the pride he could feel. But just as momentum built, Castle's image haunted the back of Jake's mind. The echo of that casual derision, a few high school students, slithered back into his thoughts. Was he setting himself up for public failure? Would Castle laugh at him again, brandishing his own successes like a weapon? Would every stifled breath from his peers become ammunition for Castle's voice? The nervous energy shifted to excitement, and as they split into brainstorming teams, Jake felt renewed, a burgeoning leader stepping into a space he never thought he would claim. Still, self-doubt clawed, lurking in the shadows, a burgeoning brim of shame waiting for an occasion to pull him back into obscurity. He had yet to truly confront Castle, and the untested leadership felt frail against the weight of impending scrutiny. Hours passed in a blur of sketches and notes. They generated ideas on how to harness solar power through practical applications, a much-needed embodiment of his earlier inspiration. As they gathered their findings, he caught sight of Castle slipping through the door moments before they wrapped up, smirking as all heads turned. Jake's heartbeat quickened. He could sense the severity of the moment. He had a choice. Shrinking into silence could feel safer, but that would also mean surrendering. It was time to face the odds. The time had come to confront Castle head-on. Would he crumble under the pressure or rise by showcasing his newfound strength? With grit tightening his jaw, Jake discerned something alarming lurking on his periphery, the thrill of conflict edging dangerously close. Now he needed to pivot and prepare. Would he stand tall against a giant, or would he slip back into the shadows that waited hungrily around him? Every fiber of him screamed for action, yet uncertainty simmered just below the surface. The moment of confrontation was arriving, and Jake didn't know how he would stand. But one truth rang clear. He was no longer just a boy with a dream. He was a catalyst igniting change, ready to face whatever consequence came next. Jake's heart raced as the door swung shut behind Castle, an ominous silence lacing the air like an unwelcome mist. He could feel the skeptical eyes in the room, the lingering whispers of uncertainty, curling around him like tendrils, threatening to squeeze the resolve he had just begun to nurture. No, he thought fiercely, never again would he let someone like Castle dictate how he felt about his worth or his ambitions. "All right, let's regroup," he said, surprising himself with the authority in his tone. He motioned for everyone to come closer, the faint sparkle of excitement flickering in their expressions, a reflection of the passion he was desperately trying to ignite within himself. "Castle's here." The name hung heavy in the air, but he pushed past the unease it generated. "He thinks we can't do this, that we're just kids playing with ideas." He paused, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves before continuing. "But that only makes us more determined, right? We have something he doesn't, with all his money and connections, creativity and a fresh perspective." His words ignited a flurry of nods, and Jake felt a swell of energy incubating in the room, morphing skeptics into supporters. Carla, once so critical, leaned in, her brows furrowing in contemplation. "Maybe we should put together a presentation," she suggested, her uncertainty warping into a resolve that mirrored Jake's own. "If we can show real data, a working model, maybe they'll listen then. Maybe we can create something Castle can't dismiss." "Yes," Jake exclaimed, buoyed by her suggestion. "Let's break down our ideas into actionable steps. We need to showcase real results, tangible prototypes that they can't ignore. We're not just students, we're potential innovators, no matter what Castle thinks." And with that prospect, the room crackled with energy, fingers passionately scribbling notes, ideas floating like leaves on a breeze. With every exchanged word and shared glance, Jake felt something within him solidify. It was as if layers of doubt were being stripped away, revealing a more resolute version of himself. As the brainstorming continued, flashes of inspiration danced before him. This project wasn't merely about proving Castle wrong. It was about discovering the strength he held within, a chance to redefine what he was capable of. The confrontation had transformed. It was less about the fight and more about the assertion of his newfound identity. By evening, their initial ideas had transformed into sketches and plans, a blueprint for a solar-powered initiative that could potentially benefit not just their school, but the surrounding community. Each member of the group leaned into their strengths: Sarah's organizational skills, Carla's analytical mind, and Jake's creativity merged into a cohesive plan that began to feel intoxicatingly real. However, a sliver of doubt crept back in as they prepared to leave. What if Castle was right? What if their ideas fell flat? A splinter of fear pierced his bravado, but then he replayed the moments of this day. The laughter, the shared determination, the commitment displayed by each of his team members. No matter the outcome, this experience was solidifying him, shaping him into a leader, even if he still struggled to see it himself. And then came the moment he had been veering away from. He needed to confront Castle, to face the mastermind who lit this fire within him. There was nothing left to hide behind. Standing at the threshold of a new chapter, the boundary of an inevitable confrontation, Jake clenched his jaw, a mantra echoing in his mind. I am more than just a boy with a dream. Tomorrow the truth would emerge, and it would unveil his strength. But before he could contemplate the details of that encounter, he felt a surge of determination. He was not merely a participant in this narrative. He would author his own story. As he stepped into the hallway, a sudden thought struck him. Castle was nothing but a mirror reflecting his own fears back at him. Now it was time to shatter that reflection. What awaited him when he finally faced Castle? Would he crumble under the weight of his own ambitions, or would he rise above, igniting a spark that could illuminate even the darkest doubts? The sun slipped beneath the horizon, casting shadows across the school, yet Jake felt a fierce glow of purpose within him. The uncertainty of the day coiled in his stomach, but a determined fire ignited with every step he took towards his locker, where the familiar cascading sounds of lockers opening and closing echoed a rhythm of anxiety in his ears. Each sound reminded him of the uncharted territory he was about to explore, confident confrontation with Castle. As the echo faded, Jake inhaled deeply, rehearsing not just his words, but his emotions. He was ready to face the embodiment of his self-doubt, to dismantle the blockade Castle had woven around his ambitions. But the looming complexity of his task sent tendrils of apprehension curling back into his mind. What if Castle's wealth and connections overshadowed his determination? The next morning, the air was electric with anticipation, and the school buzzed with the gossip of Castle's scheduled visit. Jake could hear whispers trailing through the hallways, each voice laced with incredulity. But rather than allowing their doubts to seep into him, Jake wrapped them around his resolve, like armor against skepticism. When Castle finally entered the building, he was as imposing as ever, a titan among mere mortals. The air shifted, a weighty fog of expectation blanketing the room. Jake's heart raced, but instead of shrinking back, he took a steadying breath, readying himself to channel the resolve he had cultivated within the safety of his group. As their eyes met, Jake felt the challenge permeate the space between them, a palpable tension that sparked an unexpected clarity. Castle smirked, arrogance oozing from his demeanor, as if he anticipated Jake's submission. But this was not a moment for retreat. It was a battle for conviction, where Jake's burgeoning leadership would face its first real test. Castle, Jake began, his voice steady and unwavering, I'd like to share our proposal with you. Castle raised an eyebrow, half amused. A proposal? You kids really think you can impress me with your little project? You can't just throw ideas out and expect them to stand up against real-world scrutiny. Real-world scrutiny? The phrase echoed in Jake's mind. Wasn't that precisely what he was working against? He felt tension spark in the air, yet he maintained his composure. That's exactly what we're attempting to confront, sir, Jake replied, his words gaining strength. to show there is merit in creativity and innovation, something you may underestimate. Castle's expression tightened slightly, curiosity breaking through his arrogance. You think you have a plan that can compete? We're not just hoping, Jake asserted, we're building tangible solutions. If you're willing to invest your belief in our vision, we are determined to show you what we can achieve. The room held its breath, Jake's teammates watching him with mingled hope and anxiety. It was a pivotal moment. His voice, echoing louder than before, began exposing a confidence he had never fully acknowledged. Castle studied him intently, the playful amusement now a flicker of skepticism. Jake could feel the intensity of the gaze weighing on him, as if Castle were trying to decipher whether his defiance was forged from genuine conviction or youthful bravado. "I'll give you a chance," Castle finally replied, with a calculated grin. "But remember, many have tried and failed. Don't let your dreams be a cage." As Castle stepped away, Jake felt the surge of triumph momentarily wash over him. This was only the beginning. A door had opened, but it also revealed a path fraught with trials and setbacks. A pulse of adrenaline coursed through him. He needed a strategy that went beyond mere confrontation. He had to elevate their project to exceed Castle's expectations. With each step towards his teammates, the thrill of impending challenge excited him. They needed to work tirelessly now, transforming ideas into undeniable proof of their potential. They could not merely be students with an idea, they had to become innovators armed with data and prototypes. As they gathered in their usual brainstorming space, Jake's mind began piecing together a clearer strategy. Every doubt, every moment spent in fear of Castle, was now a stepping stone to assert his vision. The energy in the room buzzed with palpable possibility, and he could feel clarity fraying the edges of their collective uncertainty. Was Jake finally on the cusp of discovering the full scope of his capabilities? He had weathered the storm of self-doubt, but now, before him, lay a new obstacle, proving not only to Castle, but to himself, that he was more than a dreamer. He was ready to confront the true test of his resolve. What foundational truths about his abilities would emerge as he delved deeper into this project? What unexpected challenges awaited as they pushed forward? As Jake sat with his team, a wave of determination swept through him. They had been given a chance. Now it was time to deliver. He scrutinized the notes strewn across the table, each scribbled idea an embodiment of their collective creativity. Yet, amid this chaos of innovation, Jake felt an unsettling weight, a whisper of uncertainty that tugged at his focus. "All right, let's figure this out," he said, rallying his team. "Castle might see us as kids with a fantasy, but we are going to challenge that perception." His enthusiasm ignited a spark in his peers, fueling an energy that transformed idle thoughts into the beginnings of a robust plan. They divided themselves into brainstorming clusters, each focusing on a different aspect of the proposal: research, design, implementation, and potential market strategies. Yet, as the discussions unfolded, Jake realized the complexity of leadership. It wasn't just about pushing forward ideas or rallying the team. It was also about navigating the anxieties of his peers, many of whom returned to their shyness and self-doubt whenever the ambitious plans were thrown into the air. "Remember," he reminded them gently, "it's okay to take risks and make mistakes. That's part of innovation." Despite his efforts, Jake could see fear flickering in their eyes. They needed a leader, not just a cheerleader. He inhaled deeply, feeling the responsibility settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. This was the moment to dig deeper and ensure they all felt empowered and valued. "Let's talk about strengths," he suggested. "Everyone has something unique to contribute. What if we each shared a personal experience that made us passionate about our project?" As the team began to open up, sharing motivations rooted in personal narratives, the atmosphere shifted. Each story reinforced their shared vision, knitting their individual talents into a vibrant tapestry of ambition. Jake felt himself growing, not just as a leader, but as a collaborator, an architect of shared dreams rather than a solitary dreamer. Time slipped away, and hours morphed into intense idea-generating sessions paired with laughter and moments of shared vulnerability. Jake found his own insecurities slowly receding, replaced by something powerful, a belief in not just himself, but in the capabilities of his team. However, the specter of Castle loomed large in his mind. What would happen when they presented their work? Would their excitement translate into something compelling enough to change his perception? Jake's determination hardened into resolve. Failure was no longer an option. He started drafting an outline for their proposal, visualizing how each member's contributions would fit seamlessly into a cohesive vision. As they closed their meeting, energized and focused, Jake felt a new kind of weight settling in. It was the weight of responsibility he had willingly accepted. Yet, at the same time, it was an exhilarating challenge he was ready to embrace. He needed to reinforce the team's confidence further, preparing them for potential setbacks that might come from Castle scrutiny. "We can do this," he asserted firmly. "Let's channel any doubts we have into our work. If we believe in our project, others will too." Leaving the room together, his heart raced with equal parts excitement and fear. The future was an open canvas, but it would take every ounce of their creativity, resilience, and collaborative spirit to turn their vision into a reality. But just as Jake felt clarity in their path forward, an unforeseen challenge loomed on the horizon.
Comment from another student in the hallway echoed in his mind. They think they can beat Castle? They're just kids. Would that negativity disrupt their momentum? Could they effectively counter the naysayers while focusing on validation from Castle? Doubts nagged at him even as his resolve hardened. As Jake prepared for the days ahead, ready to elevate his team's proposal, he sensed that the true test of their capabilities was yet to come. Would they rise to meet the challenge, or would external doubts become a formidable obstacle? The air grew thick with possibility, as the stakes had never felt higher. Jake stood at the threshold of his evolution, yet the next step presented its own daunting uncertainty. What hidden strengths would they need to uncover in the coming storm? And could they turn doubts into opportunities for growth? As the days progressed, the pressure weighed heavily on Jake's shoulders. Each morning was accompanied by a surge of determination intertwined with a gnawing fear of failure. The comment from the other student replayed in his mind, each repetition escalating his anxiety. "They're just kids." The sharpness of those words lingered like a cold draft seeping through the cracks of his confidence. Jake could sense that his team was feeding off his energy, but as he caught glances of their apprehensive expressions, he realized that he could not afford to show them his own doubts. This delicate balance of leadership called for mastery he had yet to fully grasp. How could he motivate a team that mirrored his own internal turmoil? With each team meeting, he pushed harder for innovative ideas, desperate to transform their collective dreams into a tangible proposal that could stand up against the scrutiny of Castle and his established reputation. Perhaps his relentless pursuit of excellence was driven by a need to overshadow his perceived shortcomings. At night, Jake found himself sitting at his desk, surrounded by crumpled papers filled with outlines, sketches, and half-formed thoughts. He questioned his vision. Had he focused so much on rallying his team that he had neglected the importance of establishing a clear, unique identity for their project? Realizing that clarity was paramount, he decided to take a step back. "What does our project truly represent?" he wondered aloud, while fighting an urge to scribble yet another idea. After days of pondering, he invited his team for another brainstorming session, determined not just to dictate ideas, but to facilitate a genuine exploration of what made their project unique. "Let's think about our core values," Jake encouraged, leaning into his role as a collaborative facilitator. "What do we want to communicate? What sets us apart?" In the discussion that followed, Jake felt a subtle shift, A blossoming excitement emerged as ideas intermingled and energized the group. They started articulating their motivations clearly, emphasizing the human elements behind their proposal, the need for innovation, the drive to support others, and a passion for making a difference. They weren't just competing against Castle, they were striving to create something meaningful. Jake marveled as he witnessed his peers step out of their shells, infusing confidence in their shared ambition. Each newly articulated idea felt like a glimmer of light illuminating the dark corners of his self-doubt. He realized something pivotal in this moment. Their project wasn't necessarily about beating Castle. It was about creating something that reflected their potential and passions. Yet, even with this breakthrough, doubt still nagged at Jake. Could they truly maintain their enthusiasm when faced with inevitable setbacks? Would Castle's assessment stifle their creativity? These questions weighed on him as they refined their work, driving him to further support their confidence. With the submission deadline looming larger than ever, Jake devised a plan for their final presentation, aiming to showcase not only their project, but the heart and teamwork behind it. He recognized that his own growth hinged on how well he could represent both the project and the team's unique story. As they rehearsed, Jake began to feel a flicker of hope rising within him. "This is our time to shine," he reminded them. But deep down, he wrestled with anxiety over potential rejection from Castle. The day before the presentation arrived, and with it, a haunting thought crept into Jake's mind. What if they weren't taken seriously? What if all their efforts amounted to nothing? That uncertainty danced mockingly on the edges of his consciousness, a stark contrast to the vibrant future he envisioned for his team. When they gathered one last time before going into battle against the naysayers, Jake could feel the electricity in the air. Each member was ready to face the storm, yet he couldn't shake the haunting specter of doubt. As he looked into their eager faces, he felt the driving need to confront those lingering thoughts head-on. He needed to arm himself with a rebuttal against that negativity, to transform external doubt into internal motivation. "Tomorrow, we show them what we can do," he declared. But with the declaration came a realization. He needed to articulate their story clearly and decisively. The uncertainty of the day ahead loomed larger than ever, challenging Jake to confront not just the doubts of others, but his own. Would they emerge transformed or fall prey to the very doubts they sought to conquer? And as Jake prepared to face the storm, he questioned whether this presentation would be the breakthrough he yearned for or their downfall. The tension thickened, and with it, a sense of impending revelation awaited. The morning sun filtered through the classroom windows, casting slanting rays across desks filled with anticipation. Jake stood at the front, heart pounding, nerves coiling tighter with each passing second. Today was not just about making a presentation, it was about proclaiming his identity, showcasing the culmination of everything he had become in the past few months. It was the moment to prove that determination could carve pathways through privilege. As he looked out at the audience, the tension in the air was tangible. Jake's teammates stood behind him, a mixture of excitement and trepidation in their expressions. Castle sat front and center, the same smirk firmly in place. Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to unveil their vision. "Today, we're here not just to present a project, but to challenge a perspective," Jake began, voice steady but passionate. The words poured out, each one weighted with significance. "We stand before you as a collective, a group with a shared vision for a sustainable future where energy is accessible to everyone." The audience responded with an attentive hush, interest tinging the air as they absorbed his confidence. Jake pressed on, introducing the components of their proposal, the methods of solar energy implementation, community involvement, and tangible benefits for their town. He familiarized them with their framework, showcasing graphs and models that outlined the potential impact of their innovations.
But it wasn't merely the facts that mattered, it was the soul behind the initiative. As Jake spoke, his energy intensified, igniting not just a response from his classmates, but something even more essential, a spark of engagement that connected them to his vision. Imagine a world, he proposed, where each individual plays a part in shaping energy usage, a community where innovation is encouraged, not just dismissed. The dismissal that once haunted him no longer held power in this moment. He transformed it into rallying cries. Instead of waiting for validation from others, we can initiate our own change. Together, we can redefine what success looks like beyond the confines of privilege. Jake's gaze locked onto Castles, who seemed momentarily caught off guard. Was there a flicker of uncertainty behind that facade of control? Jake seized the moment, pushing further, adrenaline surging in his veins. This isn't just about us, it's about every student who has been underestimated, every dream that has been dismissed. We have the capability to spark genuine change. As he concluded, silence enveloped the room, filled with palpable energy and curiosity. What once a mere idea now resonated with undeniable potential. He had invited them all into a new narrative. Jake stepped down, hearts racing as applause erupted. There were gasps of surprise and admiration. He could see how the conversation generated a ripple of excitement. He felt light, a burden lifted. He had conquered the doubts that had once held him captive. This was not merely about proving Castle wrong. This was about forging his identity and embracing the power each individual holds. The debriefing session invited questions, and Jake welcomed each of them, standing firm in his knowledge and ready to back up their claims. They engaged in thoughtful discussions, his teammates confidently interjecting, showcasing their unique insights. The camaraderie within their team shone brightly, as if the weight of their earlier struggles had been transformed into shared triumph. But Castle remained skeptical. Interesting concepts, but how do you propose to implement these ideas with no funding? His tone dripped with condescension that had once disheartened Jake. In that moment, clarity enveloped Jake like sunlight breaking through clouds. We're not waiting for your permission, Castle. Yes, we are students, but we are also innovators. Our vision could be the very foundation of a new approach to how our community accesses energy. We will find the resources we need to bring it to life, not just from you, but through genuine collaboration with our peers and community leaders. Jake's words hung in the air, bold yet grounded. He felt the strength of those behind him, their belief in what they had created, and their solidarity added layers to his conviction. The room buzzed with energy, the tide unrolling favorably toward them. As the session concluded, students approached with questions, eager to learn more, eager to be a part of this burgeoning community-driven movement. To his astonishment, even some of the initially skeptical students began to voice their support. The realization flooded through him. He wasn't just challenging the status quo, he was building a coalition aimed at uplifting others. Walking out of that room, Jake felt an exhilarating wave of satisfaction. The project had transitioned from a personal ambition into a larger cause, breathing newfound life into everything he had aspired to accomplish. The final test was behind him, yet the journey ahead glimmered with potential. In the weeks that followed, proposals were submitted, community forums were arranged, and initiatives developed potential partnerships that rallied students, teachers, and local businesses to support their vision. With each subsequent milestone, undervalued initiatives blossomed into tangible change, echoing the very ideals they had fought to assert. And as Jake walked through the halls of his school, the once bated breaths of silence transformed into excited chatter about possibilities and collaborations. He had woven a tapestry of hope and ambition, deeply fulfilling his desires. Castle had underestimated him, and in turn, Jake had proved that one determined voice could disrupt even the strongest barriers built on privilege.
He had not just found success, he had cultivated confidence and self-worth, a personal achievement that ran deeper than accolades. Jake had transformed from the boy in the diner flipping burgers into a catalyst for change, embodying the spirit of resilience and self-belief. This was not merely the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of a legacy. Jake understood now that true power lay in resilience, collaboration, and the unwavering belief that everyone has a voice worth amplifying. For those who resonate with stories of perseverance, who understand the journey of overcoming doubt, don't wait even one more second. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire greatness. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and empower more incredible journeys like Jake's. Comment your reactions and theories about this inspiring conclusion, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. You need to show your support and be a part of a community that embraces personal growth and change.